Think about the last story that had you totally hooked, the one where you just couldn't stop reading or watching because you desperately needed to know what was going to happen. I'm willing to bet that story had some pretty darn high stakes. The characters had everything to lose, and every choice they made had huge consequences. That's because stakes and consequences are like the secret ingredients that take a story from bland to mind-blowing. They're what give your plot that extra kick, that irresistible pull that keeps readers glued to the page or viewers glued to the screen. And today, we're going to talk all about how you can use stakes and consequences to level up your own stories and keep your audience absolutely riveted. So first, let's talk about what stakes actually are. Essentially, stakes are what your character has on the line, what they stand to gain if they succeed, and more importantly, what they stand to lose if they fail. Stakes can be external, like the fate of the world hanging in the balance, or they can be internal, like a character risking their most closely guarded secrets and emotions. But the key is that the stakes have to matter, both to the character and to the story as a whole. If the consequences of failure are just a shrug and a meh, whatever, your audience isn't going to be very invested. But if the consequences are devastating, life-altering, or just deeply personally significant to the character, suddenly every choice they make becomes fraught with tension and meaning. Think about it like this. If I told you a story about a guy who needs to choose between two different brands of cereal at the grocery store, you'd probably be bored to tears. But if I told you that guy was a spy, and the cereal he chose was actually a secret code that would determine whether a hostage lived or died, well, now we've got some stakes. Suddenly, the decision between Frosted Flakes and Cheerios is a matter of life and death, and you're on the edge of your seat waiting to see what he picks. That's the power of stakes. They give weight and urgency to your plot. They make readers care about what happens because the outcomes will have a profound impact on characters they've come to know and love. And the higher the stakes, the more desperate we are to keep reading or watching to see how it all turns out. But here's the thing. For stakes to really pack a punch, they need to be personal. It's not enough for the stakes to be objectively high. They need to hit your character right where they live. They need to be tied into their deepest fears, desires, and relationships. Let's go back to our spy in the cereal aisle. Sure, any decent person would want to save a hostage, but imagine if that hostage was the spy's long-lost sibling, or their ex-lover, or someone else with immense personal significance. Suddenly, the stakes are not just life and death, but emotional Armageddon. Suddenly, we're not just worried about whether the spy will make the right choice. We're emotionally invested in the consequences for them and their loved ones. As a writer, that's what you want. You want your readers to be so attached to your characters, so enmeshed in their emotional lives, that the stakes feel personal to them too. You want them to feel your characters' triumphs and heartbreaks as if they were their own. And the key to that is tapping into those personal pressure points, those intimate costs and consequences. But crafting killer stakes isn't just about going big or getting personal. It's also about pacing and escalation. You don't want to blow your biggest stakes right out of the gate. You want to start with something that matters and then keep upping the ante as your story unfolds. It's like in a good poker game. You don't go all in on the first hand. You start with smaller bets, then keep raising the stakes as the game goes on, until everyone's sweating and the pot is full enough to make a grown man cry. The same principle applies to storytelling. You want to start with stakes that are meaningful, but still leave room to grow. Then, as your plot progresses and the conflicts get thornier, you want to keep layering on new complications and costs, building to a final climax where everything is on the line. Maybe your story starts with your protagonist risking their pride to ask out their crush, but then they find out their crush is actually a rival spy, and the stakes become about national security. And then they discover a mole in their own agency, and the stakes become about trust and loyalty. And then the rival spy turns out to be a double agent, and the stakes become about love and duty. Each twist and turn should raise the bar, so that by the time we reach the final showdown, the stakes are through the roof and we're biting our nails down to nubs. But here's the really cool part. When you craft your stakes just right, they don't just make for a more exciting plot. They can also help you tap into the deeper themes and messages of your story. Because at the end of the day, the stakes and consequences your characters face are a reflection of what your story is really about. Are the stakes in your story about a character risking everything to stand up for what they believe in, even in the face of overwhelming adversity? Then your story is probably exploring themes of courage, integrity, and fighting for what's right. Are the stakes about a character having to choose between two equally devastating options? Then your story is likely grappling with ideas about sacrifice, impossible choices, and the consequences of our actions. When you connect your stakes to your story's central ideas like this, you're not just crafting page-turning excitement. You're layering in thematic richness and resonance. You're giving your readers something to chew on long after the final page is turned, something that speaks to the deep truths and struggles of the human experience. So, as you're working on your own stories, really spend some time thinking about your stakes. Ask yourself, what do my characters stand to gain or lose? How can I make those stakes feel not just big, but intimate and personal? How can I keep raising the stakes to maintain that delicious tension and momentum? And what do the stakes and consequences in my story say about the themes and ideas I want to explore? If you can nail those stakes and consequences, I promise you'll be well on your way to crafting a story that will keep readers up way past their bedtimes, racing through the pages to see how it all ends up. And isn't that what we all want as storytellers? For even more juicy tips on how to craft stakes that will keep your readers hooked, check out my full course on plotting and structure. I've left a link in the description below. That's how you can level up your skills and support the channel at the same time. But for now, I want to hear from you. What stories have kept you riveted with killer stakes? What do you think made those stakes so impactful and effective? Share your thoughts down in the comments, and let's dig into the nitty-gritty of narrative tension together.